If during this review you see me reaching for tissues from The Notebook themed tissue box, then rest assured it is actually seasonal allergies, but the show it's really very emotional nonetheless. I didn't kiss anyone in the middle of a rainstorm. Why am I congested? Oh my god, hey! Welcome back to my theatre-themed YouTube channel. My name is Mickey Joe, and I am obsessed with all things theatre. In particular, musical theatre, dare I say, which is why I am spending 2 weeks in New York for, like, the 4th time in a year. I've become a little bit addicted, and I'm not going to apologise for it. While I'm here, I'm seeing as many shows as possible. There are a bunch of new musicals opening on Broadway. It is maybe the most new musicals in a single Broadway season within my lifetime, one of which is the musical adaptation of The Notebook, which has just recently opened at the Gerald Schoenfeld Theatre on Broadway. The show is based on the Nicholas Sparks novel that also inspired a film adaptation starring Rachel McAdams, who is just about to open in a Broadway play a few streets over, and Ryan Gosling. And fun fact, I have neither read the book upon which this is based nor seen the film. Somehow I've made it through life without seeing The Notebook. And I'm glad that I did, because aside from everything else I'm going to tell you in today's review, I don't think your enjoyment of the musical is in any way dependent on your enjoyment of the existing source material or previous adaptations. All of which is to say, I don't think you need to have read the book or seen the movie. But I am going to be telling you what I thought of this show in today's full-length video review. We're going to talk about the performances, the show's incredibly unique casting approach, and whether I thought that worked. We're going to talk about the material, we're going to talk about this score, we're going to talk about this book, we're going to talk about this set design. I'm excited to tell you about it, I hope you're excited to watch. If you enjoy this video, make sure to subscribe to my theatre-themed YouTube channel, because this is just the first of many new musicals that I'm going to be talking about from Broadway. Make sure you're subscribed with the notifications turned on so you don't miss my upcoming reviews of shows like Suffs, like Water for Elephants, like Lempicka, like The Great Gatsby, as well as many more. And I've also talked about all of those as ready over on Instagram. I've also been uploading my first impressions reviews for my channel members. You can click the link in the bio. There's various ways you can find out what I thought about things. Finally, if you have also seen The Notebook, I would love to hear what you thought about it. Comment down below with all of your thoughts and feelings about this show. For now, let me tell you what I thought about The Notebook. So I think I would like to tell you a little bit about the narrative of the show and the plot. There may be some light spoilers here. I'm going to try not to spoil anything too extensively for you. I gather that most people other than me will have some knowledge of this story anyway, either from the book or from the film, but we kind of have to start at the end because a lot of it is retrospective. So it's about a love story between these two characters who you see captured here in glorious rainbow watercolour, Allie and Noah. She is from a wealthy family and they are staying in proximity to where Noah lives with his father, where he works on the lumberyard with him for the summer. They have this chance meeting when they are young. They are both very taken with each other, but Allie's parents do not approve of her spending time with someone from a lower class than what they had planned for her. They want her to marry someone rich and successful who will give her a comfortable life, because this is also set several decades back. Now, the way that we find out about all of this is via storytelling done by Noah at an older age, because he and Allie are together in an assisted living facility where he is reading from a book that tells the story of their life together and of their romance, and they're coming together and they're coming apart and they're coming together again. And because of this framing device, the story isn't necessarily linear. Like, we begin with the introduction, and that happens in quite a straightforward narrative structure, which makes sense because that's a very important part of the story for us to see and understand, because they have to earn our investment with these characters and with this relationship. We have to believe this love. It's the central thing of the whole show. But as the older Allie grows a little bit restless, Noah then accelerates to a later point in the story. And the way that this is conceived with the casting of the show is we actually have 3 different performers who portray Allie and Noah at various different times of their life. So we have this pair of younger performers who play them when they are first meeting. We then have a pair of performers who play middle Allie and Noah when they are coming back together after having spent years apart, because he's been in Vietnam. She, meanwhile, has become engaged to someone else and, hadn't heard from him for years because of this Great Gatsby style plotline where he'd been writing to her, but the letters hadn't been reaching her because her parents had been obstructing it. Literally, the Great Gatsby is telling the same story simultaneously in another Broadway theatre. And then you have 2 more performers portraying older Allie and Noah, looking back on their history together. And to get a little bit ahead of myself and actually review how I thought this worked, I was initially confused as to why there was the middle Allie and Noah just when the casting was announced for the show, because normally if we're seeing it split, we're seeing it split between older and younger, unless it's something like the Cher show or the Donna Summer musical. But the show really justifies this approach, because what you end up getting are three very different and very specific depictions of what love can look like. So you have this youngest couple, right, who very earnestly and passionately and naively portray what young love can be, where it feels so desperate and so vital and they just have to be together, and it's not rational and it's not reasonable, it's not particularly well considered, but they just feel this impulsive yearning for each other and this longing to be together. It is very well performed by the performers, it's very well written by the material, and that is what this youngest generation of the two of them represents. The middle performers, meanwhile, have both had a little bit more life experience, and it's not quite as easy for them to just come back together. Even when they are reunited, there are obstacles in their way. A lot of life has happened, a lot of years have passed, and there are a lot of other realities for them to surpass and for them to get around. This is what I like to call a realistic or a grown-up love, where everything isn't quite as obvious and immediate a fairy tale ending. This is love that requires you, as it does in the show, to make choices and sacrifices. Finally, you have this later in life love, which is so beautifully portrayed in the show, and which kind of the whole show is building towards, because this is not really a musical about young Allie and Noah. It's a musical that uses young Allie and Noah to explain older Allie and Noah. That's who the show is actually about. That's whose story it's telling. And you know, parts of that first love are present in the later one. They're just the longing for each other and the yearning and the need to be together, but there's also a wisdom to it and an immense amount of life experience to it, and such a knowledge of each other, which has heartbreaking dimensions because of other things that happen in this plot that I will talk about later on. But like I said, those three different depictions of what this one relationship between these two people could be are so different and so specific. That's why I think the triple casting works very well. In terms of how the show is actually brought to the stage, like I mentioned, the narrative is occasionally a little bit non-linear. There are moments where we see multiple Allies on stage together, multiple Noahs on stage together. The memories tend to overlap and blur between each other a little bit. The set design by David Zinn and Brett J. Bernakis uses a bunch of different elements. Notably, there is a stream at the front of the stage. There is rain that happens in the iconic rain moment from the film. There is an upper level to the set that I actually don't think is really used enough to justify it being there. I think it's just one of those things where the more expensive a Broadway set looks, the happier people will be to have paid money for tickets. And if you think that's a slightly odd inference, people weren't happy to be paying as much as they were paying for Hamilton back in the day, because they said that only had one set. And if you think about what the set of Hamilton is and what it does, that's kind of ludicrous. In terms of the show's material and who has written the thing, it has a book by Bekah Brunstetter and music and lyrics by singer-songwriter Ingrid Michaelson. Her involvement with this show as its composer and lyricist perhaps being a product of Sarah Bareilles' success with Waitress, and the whole thing is directed by Michael Greif and Schele Williams. But that, I think, gives you a sense of what the show is about. Let me tell you what I actually thought of it. So I was charmed by The Notebook. I was very charmed by it. I actually would like to go and see it a second time. If I get the chance in the next few days while I'm still here, I would like to go back and just to get a better bite of The Notebook. I think I would like to digest it a little bit more. But what I saw of it, I did really enjoy. I do think that not all of the dots necessarily join up. I think it conveys a really strong emotional impact and it sets up these really brilliant performances, but it also coasts on those a little bit. It coasts on, you know, the winning, overpowering emotional intensity of the thing, and it doesn't necessarily do all of the work to perfect the storytelling that would make us feel that even more intensely. I'll give you some examples of this. And it's something about the collaborative process of the show and how it's been put together, because I like a lot of the direction, I like a lot of the music, I like a lot of the book, but I don't feel as though they're consistently as cohesive as they perhaps ought to be. Let's start with the score, because one criticism I've heard of this that I do tend to agree with is that the whole thing has a very similar quality. Now, this can be interpreted two different ways. You could say it's great that the score has an identity and a feel, which it very much does. The other side of that is that it does begin to feel a little bit samey. And from that, it can be a little bit hard to extricate really great standalone songs. There is at least one called If This Is Love. That is a fantastic song. I would like for it to be reprised, because this is sung largely by the youngest Allie when she is coming to terms with a decision, or perhaps with indecision. The way the song is actually framed is a little bit puzzling, because the last time we've seen her, she was trying to introduce Noah to her parents and trying to endear Noah to her parents. This was absolutely never going to go well, because her parents didn't really behave themselves properly, and honestly neither did he. There is a big argument. They tell them that they can't be together. Noah storms out, and Allie begs him to meet her later at this spot, at an outhouse. He leaves without promising that he will, and then we cut away to a different scene. Now, when we cut back for Allie to sing the song If This Is Love, she's singing it with a sort of a positivity that doesn't really connect to the traumatic previous scene that she's just been in, to this argument, to the notion that Noah might not be meeting her later. She's singing with sort of a hope that we can't really derive from anything. It's also too brightly lit, and it looks like it's daytime outside, so it took me a little bit to connect the dots that this was happening before meeting him and in the outhouse, but after having dinner with her parents, because you would assume that it would be later in the evening, and it just looked like daytime. And so it's one of those things where you have a great song, but if the book isn't doing the work to set it up properly, then, it's difficult. And the lyric doesn't get the payoff because we don't have the scene leading into it, so we don't necessarily understand her motivations. That happens later with another song that Joy Wood sings as Middle Allie. This time she is the one who is walking away, and Noah has told her that she just needs to come back up the steps, and she says that she's engaged to someone else and she needs to figure out her life or whatever, and she gives him a very vague response, and she sings this song that we can then interpret as her coming to terms with the fact that she is going to make her own choices and take control of her own life. But in the most defiant and affirmative and joyous celebratory moment of that song, the steps that he was telling her to walk back up fly out, all of which gives you the implication that that is disappearing and she's leaving that behind, which is kind of the opposite of what's happening. So it's just a little bit at odds, and you're sort of, again, struggling to infer what her motivations are just on the lyric alone. Back to If This Is Love, Allie is singing the lyric, if this is love, I'm not ready, if this is love, why am I so unsteady? It's a lovely song. I really, really love this melody. It's one of various haunting melodies in the show, but it is also ripe for a reprise, specifically for Allie and Noah to sing it together. That is the moment I really wanted to happen at some point in this show, and we just never got it. I think there could be more reprise in this show, more use of motifs, the sense of a melody shared between the two of them that is then recalled later. There's a little bit of that. I would like more of it. I would like for there to be the themes of their relationship that then echo and recur throughout their lifetime. This is a memory play at its heart, taking place over 3 different periods of their life, and they are cast with 3 different actors. I would like for music to be the cohesive thing that ties all of them together. And the songs all sounding similar is not as powerful as actually reprising the same melodies, the same motifs. And you could reprise this one in one of 2 ways. You could either do if this is love, I am ready, or you could do just cut off the if, literally, and just do this is love, ba-da, 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 this is love, and something like that. And it would be a nice sort of tying together of the whole thing in romantic triumph. Speaking of romantic triumph, there's a squandered moment that I need to talk about because it frustrates me so much. And I want to preempt this by saying there is so much that the show does well. In particular, the first and last generations. I think those are the ones where we really nailed the romantic beats. There's a moment where oldest Allie and Noah dance together that is so heartbreaking. I absolutely cried. And it's heartbreaking in its simple joy. It doesn't need to be this huge, devastating moment. It's just very subtle and very sincere, and that's always the stuff that gets to me. Youngest Allie and Noah, again, beautifully portrayed. They get every single moment of the coming together. They get the whole meet cute thing. They get walking around the river together. They get splashing each other. They get to be playful and romantic, and we see it slowly melt into something a little bit more sensual between them. We see this blossoming romance. It's the middle ones, because it's really fraught and it's challenged, that they don't hit all of the necessary beats. And arguably the most important moment in their story is when she chooses him and she goes back. And this happens during a song that they're not singing, from what I can remember, at the side of the stage, just in the middle of the song, just while the music is happening, she runs over and he picks her up, and because we've been in and out of different timelines at this point, we're not 100% clear that we're seeing the moment where they're coming back together, and then she has a suitcase and it's like, oh, I guess I have to do the work and infer that that's what this is. But you want to be able to see that scene, and it happens sort of during a song with lots of different versions of them on stage. But her choosing him is such an important moment that we feel robbed of getting to see his reaction, because for all we know, he just thought she was leaving because he wasn't party to the big song that she sang for us when she confused us all about what it was that she was going to do and the steps flew away. When she goes back, we really want to see a scene between the two of them, or a song between the two of them, whatever it needs to be, where we just get to bask in that reunion moment where they both know that they're going to be together for the rest of their lives. We didn't get that. That's not to say there are no good moments between these two, because they get the rain moment. And this is just, it's very well done. And I think the success is not overcomplicating it. You just need the two of them standing there. It starts to rain a little bit. It starts to rain really heavily. They get drenched. They're laughing about it. And then very believably, they come together and they do the picking her up and they do the kiss thing, and that's all it needs to be, and they get it exactly right. And if you're in the front row, then you get a little bit splashed. Fun for you. It's like SeaWorld with less animal abuse. The same thing's happened to me at a Shakespeare play before, but with blood. Less fun. Ultimately, I think your enjoyment of this one is really going to be dependent on how much you buy into it. And I think because I didn't know the material, and this was going to be my first introduction to these characters, I needed my hand to be held by the storytelling a little bit more. Not in explaining to me what was happening, but just in guiding me through the romance of it all. And if you're already invested in them, then there's a lot that will just wash over you, and I think you're probably going to love it. I want to circle back to the casting, which I applaud because it's, it's really inclusive, it's really diverse. They have a colourblind casting approach to the roles of Allie and Noah. And this, like in Hamilton, like in Six, I think is really worthy of celebration. They get to just be people telling this story. However, there is a little bit of a curiosity in how that's been interpreted for this particular production, and I don't think it's deliberate in any way. I think it's just casting on the talents and the personalities who bring these roles to life, because they are all excellent. Every one of these 6 Allies and Noahs are so fantastic. You absolutely understand why they were cast. However, there's an implication that comes with it that is a little bit confusing and creates a little bit of a problem later on. I'll explain. So young Allie and middle Allie are both played by performers of colour, as is the oldest Noah. And this inherently creates a separation of the older generation of characters to the younger two, because there is parity in the younger 2 generations and not in the older one. And if it's going to be this colourblind casting approach, which I celebrate, I wish for multiple reasons that there was even more diversity to it, that we had perhaps Asian performers in these roles, that we had young men of colour playing romantic leads. And this is a sidebar to this show, but I am beginning to get puzzled, perhaps even frustrated, by how few opportunities there are for young male actors of colour to play romantic roles, because what we're seeing in shows like Moulin Rouge, in shows like Hadestown, other than right now on Broadway, but in many things, is white men and women of colour in romantic pairings. And I just want for there to be more opportunities for young men of colour playing romantic roles on stage. And I don't even think that this manifests in this production as an issue for the Noahs. The problem is for the Allies, because when we get to this oldest generation, what's happened here, and the reason why we're telling this story, and this is a little bit of a spoiler, but you find it out pretty quickly, is that Allie is experiencing some variation of dementia or Alzheimer's, which has altered her personality, which has made it harder for her to connect to her memories, and that is why Noah is telling her their story. He's trying to draw her back out of herself, but her personality has become different. She has become a little bit removed from herself. And when we have that disconnect from her with the younger versions of herself who have parity with each other, what we lack is the sort of the heartbreaking impact of seeing someone who we know to be the same person, but they are behaving differently. Because when she is perceived by us as a different person and behaves as a different person, we don't really connect her to the younger 2 Allies. He feels very connected to the younger versions of himself because he's characterized in the same way, but she doesn't, and so we don't feel like, oh, we can see that it's her but she's not acting like her. And it's more than just skin colour, it's the challenge of the fact that her personality has shifted, and so she just doesn't feel like the same person, and so we don't feel that heartbreak. I also have a lot of structural thoughts. Now, I really like that the thing is non-linear. I like because it's about memory and because it's about their lifetime that we are jumping around. I would like if more of the flashbacks to the past were born out of conversations happening in the present, and like a specific relationship between lines that are said in the present day and then the scenes that, you know, are then drawn out of memory. It begins with us seeing those scenes because they're being read from the book. At a certain point, he stops being able to read the book and we keep seeing flashbacks for no discernible reason other than the fact that the story needs to continue for us, the audience. I would like if she started to have, oldest Allie that is, started to have more of these flashback memories starting to come back to her in his absence because of things that people around her were saying. There's a hint of that, but it's not as forthcoming as I would like for it to be. It just needs a little bit more clarity. But speaking on structure, there are a bunch of songs that I think are just in the wrong place. I actually think the Act 2 opener would serve the show better as an Act 1 opener. The number of times I have this note about musicals is fascinating to me. I also think there is a beautiful and haunting song called I Am Still In Here that the younger two Allies sing to the oldest Allie when she is like frustrated and like trying to connect and trying to piece things together. I think it just comes too soon because it's very emotional. I just don't know if it's quite been earned at that point in the show, and it's one of the first moments, other than the very opening, where we get multiple iterations of that same character singing at the same time. And when you then have If This Is Love quite quickly afterwards, you don't feel the weight of the two Allies lining up and both singing bits of If This Is Love because they've just sung together in a previous song. I think if that were just to come a bit later, then it would have more payoff. But those are a handful of my thoughts about the show. I want to tie that all in a ribbon of saying it is still really emotionally affecting. It is still beautiful, creative work. It looks great, it sounds great. The set design, while a little bit more extensive than it honestly needs to be, I think is fantastic. It's just some of these storytelling moments that could just be reorganized, and I think the whole thing would deliver a much harder emotional impact, which is what it's trying to do, right? It's trying to make you cry. What does work is all of the performances. Let me tell you about those next. So Allie is played in turn by Jordan Tyson, Joy Woods and Maryann Plunkett, all of whom are phenomenal in their own ways. The acting performance that you get from Maryann Plunkett is so devastating. I've used the word heartbreaking approximately 50,000 times in this review, but it is heartbreaking. It is beautiful work that she's doing on stage, the way that she is moved to intrigue while still trying to remain indifferent and sort of short-tempered, the way that she gets frustrated. It's a very sensitive, heartfelt and moving depiction of someone really struggling with this sort of the memory loss and amnesia that comes from Alzheimer's. It's also very impressive the tension with which she holds herself the entire time, so that the moments when she relaxes and is brought comfort and remembers and like things come back to her show a softening, and it has that power. It's really fantastic work from her. Probably some of the best subtle and nuanced acting I've seen in my entire trip. Then you have Jordan Tyson as the youngest Allie. I think she's a really exciting young talent. The way she just wears her heart on her sleeve and is so bold and so hopeful, I think is really beautifully played. And Joy Woods as the middle Allie, if she doesn't have the strongest material in this show, you would have no idea, because she is going to sing that song and have you convinced that it's the best song you've ever heard, because the acting through song, the cry quality in her vocals, the fact that she can actually conjure tears to her eyes on command and is crying for like half of the time she's spending on stage. Her face is so open, so expressive. She is an open book. She is the notebook. She is the open notebook, because you know exactly what's going through her head and you can see what she is wrestling with, and you can see every single split second of realization and of jealousy and of of admiration and lust even that she is experiencing in this very conflicted middle section of her life. Joy Woods is absolutely a Broadway star whose origin we are getting to see right now in shows like this, and we're all very lucky. You have to go and see this show if only to see Joy Woods' sensational performance. Then we have the Noahs, who are opposite them, played by John Cardoza, Ryan Vasquez, and Dorian Harewood. Again, each of whom do a fantastic job. Similarly, Dorian Harewood is giving you this incredibly meaningful acting performance, and like Maryann Plunkett as Allie, you know, he is prickly and he is indifferent and he is stubborn. He has some really brilliant interactions with the different staff members at the facility where his wife is being taken care of. He's just trying to read to her, and you know, he has a better rapport with some of them than others. He has a particularly charming back and forth with Carson Stewart, who plays one of youngest Noah's friends in a flashback, but also plays the physical therapist who is trying to help him with his knee, which, you know, he can't be bothered with. He has no time for this. But they end up forging this sort of unlikely bond. It's very lovely. The comic charm of Dorian Harewood is also just very magnetic. But of everyone, I would also go as far as to say that no one is playing devotion as powerfully as Dorian is, because the love that he holds for this woman is just explosive and all-consuming, and you get that in every single thing that he does on stage. I enjoy Ryan Vasquez a lot as Middle Noah. I think it's very smartly characterized, and you can see a lot of the hope that died from the younger version of himself and the parts of him that are then awakened by the return of Allie. He and Joy Woods play really beautifully opposite each other. He doesn't have the benefit of really sensational material in that middle section of the show, and I think the best characterized Noah perhaps is John Cardoza, who is wonderful. He's giving you shades of that type of a classic young romantic leading man that we've seen before in other musicals like A Tony and West Side Story, but with renewed sensitivity and with so much character. Like, it's very much not just generic male heartthrob. He is such a real, genuine person with a little bit of a temper and a little bit of an impatience and a little bit of a chip on his shoulder, but again, such a fondness and such an admiration. And again, it's the sensitivity that bursts out of his performance, and also the insecurities. And this is not something that young men, I think, necessarily have the opportunity to play on stage in a romantic context. But there's a lot of soulfulness to his performance and an insecurity there that I find really interesting. I mentioned Carson Stewart already in the supporting cast. He gets some of the biggest laughs in the show when we really need to laugh, so he does a great job there. There's also Andréa Burns, who I think is just wonderful every single time she sets foot on stage. She plays both the nurse to older Allie and Noah, as well as youngest Allie and middle Allie's mother. Brilliantly characterized from her. She doesn't get to sing nearly as much as I would like, but she perfectly pitches every single moment of the show that she has. She feels necessarily maternal while also being a little bit ruthless and unforgiving as a stern, controlling parent. But you don't root against her because everything is grounded in the love that she has for her daughter, and she gets to portray more of a warmth while also this sort of a jaded quality of having worked in nursing for a long time when she's playing the nurse character. I like that that role is double cast in the way that it is. It's very smart because of how Allie with Alzheimer's misinterprets who she is. But those are really the central performances of The Notebook, and it's those that you are buying a ticket for. Like, the material serves them in some ways that are really strong and empowers them to some really beautiful moments on stage. Like I said, the heartbreak, the romance, it all still comes through. It is still a deeply emotional, beautiful show. There are things about it that could be improved and tailored, but anyone who is not connecting to this emotionally, I have questions about, because it is still just really, like I said, just really emotionally powerful material. If you want to go and see a Broadway show that is going to teach you a little bit about love in 3 different honest and authentic, truthful ways, go and see The Notebook. Those have been my thoughts. That has been today's video review. I hope that you've enjoyed. Like I said, if you have seen this show, comment down below with all of your thoughts and feelings. I would love to know what you thought, especially if you disagreed with any of what I had to say. And make sure to stay tuned for more Broadway reviews coming very soon. Make sure you're subscribed, make sure you have the notifications turned on. I'm about to be releasing many more video reviews, and I'm very excited to share them with you. I hope that everyone is staying safe and that you have a stagey day. For 10 more seconds, I'm Mickey Joe Theatre. Oh my god, hey, thanks for watching, have a stagey day. Subscribe!